Well, I think that went well.
I hope so.
Yeah, I think it went well. Actually, I was going to ask you, when we're coming over here today, you were talking to me about, to kind of bring it along in line with current events, about a lot of trials that are done in Ukraine and Russia and how those might be affected by some of the current events going on, especially in schizophrenia. Any thoughts and comments on kind of how that could affect, and let's just make the point that you guys are not conducting any trials
Well, initially we
over
thought
there.
to conduct in Ukraine and then Russia as well, enroll some patients there. Considering the ongoing, tension in that region, we decided to, move those many number of patients back to U.S. and maybe distribute to some of the other countries in Europe, like Bulgaria and then India in Asian countries. So we decided not to, enroll patients in Russia and then Ukraine.
Yeah, it's a wise decision in retrospect. Another thing I want to ask you about is you've got such a wide variety of conditions or indications that you're pursuing. Schizophrenia, behavioral symptoms in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and then these orphan indications with the respiratory system. What is the common thread that runs through all of these that one drug can address so many diverse?
It's not something new. Often when people think that, of course, they are different indications, but there are drugs used for multiple indications. What we are going for. One example is Abilify.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. Yeah.
So we have better, we believe, based on the profile, better optimized receptor profile compared to aripiprazole. Aripiprazole has been used off-label for several neuropsychiatric conditions, and then officially approved for treatment of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, and ADHD as well. So the common connection among these different diseases, they are all neuropsychiatric conditions. There is a significant overlap of symptoms. So having said that, let's say for schizophrenia, if we use a 15 milligram dose, when we use the same drug for depression, probably we may not need 15 milligram. It may use the lesser dose. So it is used for different indication at different dose level. But the bottom line here is a pathobiology that matters. That is the dysfunctional serotonin and dopamine neurochemicals in the brain. That is that dysfunctional, the system of dopamine serotonin system, primarily implicated for these major neuropsychiatric conditions. That's why the drug, if it shows better safety profile and tolerability, it can go for multiple indication. I think based on the profile of our drug, good safety and then broad spectrum efficacy, we believe.
Now, will the safety benefit be the same across all indications? I would assume it would be, right?
Correct.
But maybe there's some other considerations.
One way to assess that one is in the phase 1 study, we use in the healthy volunteers dose in any trial, any drug when in the development.
Right.
And then when we move on to actual patient population. So one way to assess that one as a layman's perspective. So how can I assess a drug, the safety of the drug, when we go for multiple indications? So if you look at our drug, the 15 milligram dose showed 20-point improvement in schizophrenia in 4 weeks. The 15 milligram dose very well tolerated in healthy subjects.
Okay.
So
but are the side effects different in schizophrenia patients than they are in healthy patients? They could be, right? Because their brains aren't the same.
If a dose can tolerate in healthy subject, that set a stage for your safety profile.
Right.
I know that when you...
but it may respond differently in patients with a disease, right?
Well,
Couldn't it?
brain actually, schizophrenia patients have better tolerability for side effects compared to healthy subjects.
Okay.
So that's the reason why...
So it's different, but it's actually a benefit.
Yes. If a healthy subject can tolerate, then it is a good thing. It can go for multiple indications. So if you look at the dose, what the projected dose for schizophrenia, it is a majority of the patients from, moderate schizophrenia patients or maybe beyond moderate can be treated with a 15 milligram dose. Only the very acutely ill patients with a severely acutely ill patient may require higher dose, a 50 milligram. But our projected dose for treatment of PH and then IPF is around 10 to 15 milligram dose per day.
So it's
15
lower.
milligram is already tolerated in healthy subjects.
So it should be even better.
That's the confidence we have. This drug may be very well tolerated in PH and then IPF, even though it is not primarily targeted for mental illness, but this can be tolerated.
Okay. Yeah. Another question I like to ask, it's kind of a little out there, but just about bioavailability, especially for drugs that have to end up in the brain, because, if you take an oral drug, which this is, it's going to go through, your GI system, it's going to go through the liver, it's going to go through the bloodstream, and then it's going to cross the blood-brain barrier. I mean, that's a long way to go, right? So what, how much actually is getting to the brain, and does brilaroxazine have a different profile than, some of the other leading drugs out there?
Approved, there are different, other than the, primary target pharmacology, for a side effect profile, the way how much drug absorbed in the body, and then how much it gets into the brain, and then how it cleaves in the body. These are very important factors, contributing to drug safety. See, brilaroxazine absorbed very well. It's over 90%, 95% absorbed in the body. And then it crosses the blood-brain barrier freely. And then, in fact, it's a brain versus plasma. It's around 3.5% higher in the brain. So that's one of the reasons why, at the low dose, we have seen the good efficacy. This is not the case with all the blockbuster drugs currently in the market. Some of the blockbuster drugs are absorbed only around 19% in the body. So again, brain penetration has again further reduced. So we have better absorption, over 95%, and then also good brain penetration. So that makes difference with respect to having low dose translating into efficacy. So bottom line is, for treatment of mental illness, the key to is a ability of a drug to cross the blood-brain barrier. So I think brilaroxazine has a better profile.
So for these atypical antipsychotics, I've seen some other types of administration in other drug classes, like a patch, nasal administration, prodrugs. I mean, is anyone in this class using any of those approaches? And are any of them appropriate, or is oral just sufficient the way it is?
Most, at least few drugs are approved or in development. Beyond oral dose is a depot formulation, we call it. It's a monthly dose. It's a intramuscular injectable.
Is that like a pegylated maybe, or is that?
Yes, yeah. So it is a monthly or a 30 days dose, a 15 days dose also available with some of the approved drug. But widely used one is Abilify, a monthly depot formulation. So to develop this kind of formulation,
they don't have a patch or anything like that, do they?
The patch, there are in the development stage. It's not really well used in the clinical setup. Yes, there are.
I mean, is there a reason for that? I mean, because you avoid the first pass metabolism, and it goes into the bloodstream.
To have a commercial success of whether it's in other words, we call it as a life cycle management, various delivery route. So the key to achieve commercially successful formulation is if an oral drug dose is a lower dose, around 10 to 15 milligram effective dose, you have the better chance of developing various other formulation. If your oral dose is higher than 15 to 20 milligram, the ability to formulate in a different formulation delivery techniques, whether it is a monthly dose or a various other patch, will be difficult, because if you look at a patch, let's say if the oral dose is around a 15 milligram, so when you condense into a patch, if it is a once a day patch, it's not attractive because every day you need to remove that patch. It's not a very convenient delivery. Ideally, if you have patch, it should be lasting at least a week. So if a drug is dosed around 100 milligram in a smaller patch, 5 days worth of 100 milligram dose, it's very difficult to make formulation. We can make it. If the patch size is too large, patients would not like it. That's the limitation.
I mean, does it have any side effect benefits at all, or is it just, I mean, you get more even delivery of the drug, right? It's more even over time, which I assume that's a benefit you always want, right?
Yes, there are drugs currently available for, especially in the movement disorders, Alzheimer's treatment,
Right.
where patients have difficulty in swallowing. And then also it is convenient for children, pediatric population, because children have problem in swallowing tablet.
Sure.
So patch may be the ideal thing, but the issue there is if the patch size is too big, most patch has a routinely used as skin irritation and other various other issues. So to overcome all these things, the ideal size is
make it small.
it should be smaller.
Yeah.
And then if the dose is large, you cannot load it. And then ideally it should be at least for a week. These are all the constraints we have.
Right.
With respect to bilaroxazine, we believe, like for example, some of the conditions, neuropsychiatric conditions, 10 to 15 milligram is good enough for oral dose. So if you can, if we can easily translate into patch, weekly patch, with a 10 to 15 milligram dose, it's 60 milligram per week. That can be made, transdermal patch, as well as we can make it to a monthly or a 45 days depot formulation. We are working on it. These programs are in the preclinical
That would probably
stage.
be good for this population, because I think adherence is always an issue, right?
Yes.
So you could overcome that. What about nasal administration? I mean, that might be a bit out there, but one of the benefits of that, I think, is it's more directly getting into the brain. Isn't that right?
Yes. So nasal administration, it is good, especially we are also developing inhaler for PAH and
Right.
IPF.
Yeah, and that's direct delivery
because
to the
you
lung.
can directly deliver drug to lungs, and majority will go and sit in the lung. So let's say, again, it is in the early stage of development. We believe for oral dose for PAH and then IPF may be ideal based on the data we have, translational data, maybe 10 to 15 milligram max may work for treating PAH and then IPF. If we develop that one for inhaler formulation, probably we can cut the dose a half, maybe 5 milligram may be optimal. Similarly, for treatment of mental illness, if you are developing a nasal formulation, so again, you can reduce the dose because it directly crosses the blood-brain barrier. It doesn't go to the whole first-pass metabolism in the gut and other things.
Right.
So again, it is our programs are in early stage development. In the coming months, hopefully we will present in some of the conferences.
Yeah, and I know all this stuff is early. I just see some of these techniques
but
being
we
used
have a
elsewhere.
system in place. We already started working on various different formulations. In other words, life cycle management. The advantage of that one would be, the patent life can be extended for this drug.
Sure, right, exactly.
Additional 20 years.
Well, one thing I didn't ask you about, but what's the ultimate goal? A lot of times for a drug like this, it makes sense to partner with a big pharma that already has a sales force in place. They can distribute it very quickly. What do you see as the plan on that side? I mean, if you don't want to say, obviously negotiations are a big part of that.
We as a company, we have thought about it in all these things. But again, it's all at the end of the day, it's the various factors contribute to making these decisions. But if you look at in the recent years, mid-sized companies started commercializing their own. Things have changed.
Okay. For some areas where there's a defined group of defined group of people that you want to market to, right? There's like certain hospitals that specialize in psychiatric care and things like that. You with a small sales force, you can actually do it. But for things that are primary care focused, you probably need somebody else's sales force just because it's so there's so many, right? But which category does this fall into?
So if you look at I've been in the industry for over 20 years, but you might be very familiar with that. back in early 2000, there used to be pharma ecosystem. Most companies would develop drug up to phase 2 and then license it to bigger pharma.
Right,
That
right.
was the ecosystem. But things have changed in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
More and more companies, in the public companies, they are starting their own commercial franchise.
Sure.
So there are various things contributed to that change in ecosystem. We are ambitious company. Yes, now we are a small, a small cap company.
Because probably a lot of times the big pharmas, they try to use that against you. It's like, well, this is only what we're paying, and then you can say, that's not enough. I'll develop it myself, and I'll do it better.
So I believe at the end of the day, it is the ability of the right financial resource to build this franchise. And then if you have the financial resource, you can build a team.
Sure,
There are companies like, I don't want to name the companies. If you look at in recently, like Intracellular, for example, they started commercializing their own product. It's just an example.
Yeah.
So we are ambitious company. Again, if the right opportunity is there, why not?
Yeah.
We can establish as a full-fledged pharmaceutical company.
Yeah. Work on some of the other indications.
At the end of the day, it's a value creation.
Yeah,
for
I mean, you
our
got to take
shareholders.
the most efficient route forward, and sometimes that can be different things at different times, depending on what the opportunities are. So, great. Well, Lax, it was great to chat about so many things. We had a good dinner last night too, where we talked about a whole bunch of other stuff. So I feel.
Yeah. Thanks.
feel like
Again, your team has analyzed the meta-analysis of the data compared with other approved antipsychotics. It's liked by many people in this field. When I share
Well, yeah,
the
it's.
data.
I mean, the drug makes a compelling argument if you read through the data, and sometimes seeing that visually helps.